imposes a 67% tariff on Chinese goods. Small package e-commerce faces a potential ban, leaving SHEIN, TEMU, and Alibaba with no way out. Xi Jinping's attempt to divide the United States and Europe has failed. China is increasingly isolated as a new global trade order is taking shape. Experts warn that the CCP is a vampire, and countries hoping to maintain good trade relations with it are indulging in a dangerous illusion. China's job market is in turmoil. State-owned enterprises are conducting mass layoffs, 12 million graduates are unemployed, and high-paying jobs are being seized by officials for their own children. Completely disgraced. Chinese tourists shunned worldwide. Is it just poor manners? What has made them increasingly uncivilized? Welcome to Decoding China, your trusted source for essential insights and timely analysis. China is surrounded on all sides. The EU imposes a 67% tariff on Chinese goods. Small package e-commerce faces a potential ban, leaving SHEIN, TEMU, and Alibaba with no way out. The US tariffs have already dealt a heavy blow to China's manufacturing industry, and now the European Union has introduced additional measures. Recently, the EU announced a tariff of up to 66.7% on mobile access equipment, MAE, imported from China. MAE is used to elevate workers to high places for various tasks, primarily in construction and telecommunications. The EU market for MAE is valued at over 1 billion euros annually. The European Commission's investigation found that Chinese manufacturers benefit from unfair subsidies, enabling them to undercut prices in the EU market. This pricing strategy increased China's market share of MAE from 29% in October 2020 to 41% in October 2022, with products priced approximately 20% lower than those of EU competitors. This tariff is part of the EU's broader strategy to combat unfair Chinese subsidies and dumping practices, aiming to protect local manufacturers and restore fair competition. Previously, after over a year of investigations, the EU imposed 5-year anti-subsidy tariffs on Chinese electric vehicles in October of the previous year. The EU has now applied anti-dumping or anti-subsidy tariffs to nearly 80 Chinese products, covering industries ranging from truck tires to ironing boards. Since US President Trump announced additional tariffs on Chinese goods, a new challenge has emerged. Where will the $440 billion worth of Chinese exports go? No single country or group of countries can fully absorb these products, and no government is willing to sacrifice its domestic industries and jobs for cheap Chinese goods. Currently, Europe, the world's second-largest consumer market, has become a primary target for Chinese exports. However, the EU is already taking precautions against a potential influx of surplus Chinese goods. In an early April interview with the Financial Times, European Commission President Ursula von der Leyen emphasized that Europe will not tolerate Chinese goods redirected from US tariffs. She stressed that if new monitoring mechanisms detect an increase in Chinese imports, the EU will implement protective measures. In addition to imposing tariffs on bulk commodities, Europe, like the US, is addressing the surge of small packages from China. Chinese cross-border e-commerce platforms, such as SHEIN and TEMU, have capitalized on small package duty-free policies, experiencing rapid growth in European and American markets in recent years. In early April, US President Trump signed an executive order imposing tariffs on small packages valued at $800 or less imported from China, raising tariffs from 30% to 90%. This measure, which also applies to Hong Kong, took effect on May 2nd. Global consulting firm AlixPartners reported to the French daily newspaper Le Figaro that within days, US companies canceled nearly half their orders for goods from Chinese suppliers. The CEO of the French Alliance Commerce told French media that China relies on exports to maintain its growth pace. If it cannot sell to the US, it will exert pressure on the European market, potentially harming French businesses. These concerns are well-founded. A source close to Temu's operations revealed that the company plans to shift its focus toward expanding in emerging markets, such as Europe, Latin America, and Southeast Asia, while reducing its reliance on the US market. In response to the growing influx of low-priced Chinese goods through small packages, which threaten security, fair competition, and fiscal stability, the European Commission recently announced plans to impose a handling fee on packages sold by major e-commerce platforms entering the EU. This fee will fund stronger customs regulations to combat illegal products. On April 29th, the French government announced it would propose at the European level a management fee on each package from Chinese exporters and e-commerce platforms, particularly targeting fast fashion giant SHEIN, cross-border shopping platform TEMU, and Alibaba. France is also advocating for the EU to eliminate the duty-free policy for small packages by 2028. French Finance Minister Eric Lombard highlighted that over 800 million small goods enter France annually, explaining that these Chinese mail packages not only compete with French businesses, but also contribute to ecological chaos, as some products fail to meet European standards. Lombard further emphasized that this situation poses risks to the French public, as these products can sometimes be dangerous. He noted that the widespread issue of counterfeit goods endangers brands and threatens public finances. In recent years, the European Commission reported that over 4.6 billion small packages entered the European market in 2024, 91% of which originated from China, equating to more than 145 packages per second, all benefiting from tariff exemptions. On April 16th, the European Commission released its annual report for the EU Rapid Alert System for dangerous non-food products, detailing dangerous products reported in 2024. The report recorded 4,137 alerts, the highest number since the system began in 2003. Approximately 40% of unsafe products were imported from China. The Commission noted that cosmetics accounted for 36% of dangerous products, making them the most frequently reported category for health risks, followed by toys, electrical products, motor vehicles, and chemical products. The most common risk factors were hazardous chemicals in cosmetics. 97% of reported products contain the banned synthetic fragrance, BMHCA, a toxic substance that can harm the reproductive system, cause skin irritation, and is prohibited in the EU. Xi Jinping's attempt to divide the United States and Europe has failed. Faced with the looming possibility of new tariff policies in Europe, some Chinese e-commerce platforms are already seeking alternative strategies. A blogger shared a method to circumvent regulations: use a chicken and egg strategy on Amazon. The process is simple. Continue selling on TikTok as usual, and once an order is received, place it on Amazon, letting Amazon handle shipping to the customer. This approach avoids the need to stock inventory and could potentially bypass taxes. The blogger noted that stricter policies create more opportunities, emphasizing the importance of quick adaptation. However, some argue that this approach is overly simplistic and may not be effective. Many products sold on Amazon also come from Chinese merchants, and Amazon faces strict regulations in Europe, making it unlikely to evade tariff sanctions. While lower-tier merchants may struggle with such tactics, the Chinese government could manipulate the exchange rate to gain an advantage. Since President Trump imposed additional tariffs on China in February this year, the Chinese yuan has steadily declined. On April 22nd, in foreign exchange trading, the euro reached 8.4 yuan, the lowest exchange rate since 2014. The yuan's depreciation against the euro, hitting a 10-year low, has heightened EU concerns about a potential surge of low-priced Chinese goods. Amid the US-China trade war, China is actively trying to draw Europe into its sphere to counter the US. On April 30th, China lifted sanctions on 5 European parliamentarians. But the European Commission responded with indifference. Chinese Foreign Ministry spokesperson Mao Ning did not directly address the move, but emphasized that exchanges between Chinese and European legislative bodies are vital to bilateral relations. She expressed hope for strengthened exchanges, welcomed European Parliament members to visit China, and highlighted the 50th anniversary of China-EU diplomatic ties, underscoring the complementary and mutually beneficial nature of their economic and trade cooperation. Political commentator Xin Tianxing believes that CCP General Secretary Xi Jinping's hardline stance on Trump's high tariffs has pushed China's economy toward a near standstill. At this critical juncture, Xi is attempting to improve relations with the EU, adopting a softer approach and showing goodwill, particularly in tariff negotiations and trade agreements, to mitigate the impact of U.S. tariffs. Xin Tianxing noted that, geopolitically, the EU and the U.S. are unlikely to fully split. Ideologically, China and Europe remain at odds in many areas, while differences with the U.S. are primarily trade-related, especially concerning tariffs, and not fundamentally ideological. The Interparliamentary Alliance on China, IPAC, comprising officials from 18 countries, issued a statement asserting that China's sanctions were baseless from the outset and that their partial removal should not be traded for significant concessions. The statement urged Europe to remain cautious and avoid hastily resuming a business-as-usual trade model with China. Previously, Xi Jinping traveled to Southeast Asia to rally countries into forming an anti-US alliance. But the effort failed. Nations like Vietnam have collaborated with the US to curb the washing of origin for Chinese goods. Thailand is updating its laws to prevent being used as a backdoor for Chinese exports. South Korea has established a special unit to work with US Customs and Border Protection on joint investigations. Countries such as Mexico and India may also tighten regulations on transshipment. Why are these countries acting so swiftly? On the surface, it's due to US pressure, but the deeper reason is their heavy reliance on the US market. Taiwanese macroeconomist Wu Jialong remarked, "No one stands with the CCP anymore. The situation is clear. The CCP is completely isolated, excluded from international organizations and the global order. The US is rebuilding a new international trade framework and, potentially, a new United Nations. The entire international order is being restructured. This comprehensive overhaul is highly targeted, aimed at excluding a rule-breaking, reckless China that believed it could surpass others by cutting corners. This is the direction the world is heading." Experts warn that the CCP is a vampire, and countries hoping to maintain good trade relations with it are indulging in a dangerous illusion. On May 5th, The Times published an article by George Magnus, an economist and research associate at the University of Oxford's China Center, highlighting a Western delusion of seeking to benefit from both sides while pursuing closer trade ties with the CCP. He noted that even the UK Treasury and other governments, amid the tariff war, believe forging closer trade relations with Beijing could offer comfort or even salvation. This myth is a fantasy, and a dangerous one, Magnus wrote. Magnus observed that China's export growth is 4 times faster than global trade growth, while its imports have been declining. This is driven by the CCP's mercantilist and industrial policies, which contradict other nations' hopes that China will boost domestic consumption and imports. The CCP is unlikely to alter its economic model and will continue exporting to other countries. In a recent interview with the Daily Telegraph, Peter Navarro, a trade advisor to President Trump, warned that the CCP is a vampire that will target the UK and EU if it cannot exploit the US. Epoch Times columnist Wang He stated that last year, China's global trade surplus reached nearly $1 trillion, a record high. Its massive exports, low price dumping, and overcapacity have significantly impacted countries worldwide. Many European scholars now recognize that the CCP does not prioritize bilateral interests in its international trade policies. Wang He added, "In this situation, you can only confront the CCP head-on. Seeking a path of mutual coexistence is impossible because the CCP's so-called win-win means defeating you twice." Sun Guoxiang, a professor at Taiwan's Nanhua University in the Department of International Affairs and Business, said, "While Magnus and Navarro's rhetoric is strong, it reflects a serious issue. China uses economic means to expand its geopolitical influence and may weaponize trade relations. Europe, Australia, and many Asian countries have already experienced China's economic pressure or threats. High economic dependence makes it harder for nations to take independent stances on China-related issues." On May 5th, President Trump, speaking aboard Air Force One, expressed hope for a fair deal with the CCP but accused it of ripping off the US for years. In a rare critique, he called former President Nixon's engagement with the CCP and establishment of relations the worst thing he ever did. Sun Guoxiang believes that, despite China's economic rise, it has not democratized as the West hoped. Instead, it poses global strategic challenges, including predatory economic behavior, technology theft, and military expansion. Trump's remarks on Nixon reflect the strategic anxiety and need for repositioning among U.S. policy elites and the public. He explained, Trump may be addressing 2 aspects. First, by targeting Nixon, he signals a more aggressive and resolute confrontational stance than his predecessors, resonating with his supporters. Second, by strongly criticizing past engagement policies, he underscores his uncompromising stance in current negotiations, pressuring Beijing. Wang He noted that Trump is using the tariff war to force the CCP into structural reforms, opening its market and abandoning its adversarial stance toward the U.S. However, this is unacceptable to the C as it would equate to a peaceful transformation under U.S. pressure. Amid the ongoing U.S.-China tariff war, senior officials from both sides are scheduled to meet in Switzerland on Saturday, May 10th, marking their first formal contact since the latest round of the tariff conflict erupted. U.S. Treasury Secretary Scott Bessent and U.S. Trade Representative Jamieson Greer will travel to Geneva on May 8th to meet with Swiss President Karen Keller-Sutter to discuss reciprocal trade issues. They will also hold face-to-face talks with China's top economic official. China's foreign ministry stated that He Lifeng, a member of the political bureau of the CPC Central Committee and vice premier of the State Council, will lead the Chinese delegation and meet with Bessent in Switzerland. Earlier, China's Ministry of Commerce announced it would resume contact with the U.S. However, the U.S. government has tempered expectations for these talks. Bessent told Fox News that the purpose is to de-escalate and create conditions for the next phase of economic negotiations. I think the purpose of this meeting is to cool things down, Bessent said. We need to de-escalate the situation before we can move forward. China's job market is in turmoil. State-owned enterprises are conducting mass layoffs, 12 million graduates are unemployed, and high-paying jobs are being seized by officials for their own children. Job scarcity has become a new norm for many Chinese, including college students once hailed as the pride of heaven. As the U.S.-China trade war escalates, the CCP has vowed to fight to the end, seemingly willing to sacrifice its citizens as cannon fodder. The loss of orders has triggered a wave of bankruptcies and layoffs sweeping across China, making an already dire job market even more brutal. Experts warn that if this continues, the volcano of social unrest in China could erupt, potentially leading to the CCP's downfall. Bloggers lament, in 2025, with 12.22 million college graduates, it's being called the toughest job market in history. The employment rate for regular undergraduates is only 5%, a monthly salary of 3,500 yuan, approximately $484 USD, isn't enough to cover rent. Waves of college graduates flood the job market like harvested leeks, one cohort after another. Universities seem to have an entrance, but no exit. Graduation often means unemployment. On March 12, 2025, a WeChat public account article went viral titled, "Only 9 out of over 100 signed contracts. How terrifying are this year's college employment numbers?" It revealed that a teacher from a Shanghai university reported that the dean of their foreign language college said the employment rate for this year's graduates was just 7.69%. Out of over 100 students, only 9 had signed contracts, prompting the dean to ask teachers to help find opportunities. This highlights that even college students with excellent grades and strong abilities struggle to find work. More alarmingly, some college graduates who secure jobs face exploitation by company bosses. Many firms hire fresh graduates to inflate employment rates and claim subsidies, only to fire them before their probation ends. Some argue that college graduates can't find jobs because today's graduates lack the quality of their predecessors. Others point to a dismal job market, with tech, education, and training industries collapsing, companies closing, and foreign capital exiting China. These are undeniable realities. However, another critical factor is that children from ordinary families, despite over a decade of hard study, cannot compete with those who have connections and influential backgrounds. On April 27, 2025, a viral story spread across Chinese social media about Dong Xiying, a doctor in the thoracic surgery department at China-Japan Friendship Hospital. Her partner, Dr. Xiao Fei, abandoned an anesthetized patient on the operating table for 40 minutes to accompany her after she was glared at by a nurse, sparking public outrage. Insiders revealed that Dong attended a U.S. high school, studied at a community college, and later transferred to Barnard College at Columbia University to study economics. Upon returning to China, she joined Peking Union Medical College's 4+4 clinical medicine pilot program, earning a medical doctorate in just 4 years. Netizens uncovered that Dong's mother, Mi Muli, is a Beijing University dean, and her father, Dong Mohui, is a deputy secretary at a state-owned enterprise. Both allegedly used their influence to secure her authorship on medical papers. Reports also claim Dong's residency training was shortened from 3 years to 1, enabling her to join the thoracic surgery department across specialties and participate in surgeries. Netizens commented, "Dong's case has caused a storm because it touches on privilege, education, healthcare, and resource allocation, pain points for most people." Another remarked, "Dong's story fuels outrage because it combines every element that angers ordinary people: academic corruption, educational inequity, medical conflicts, and entrenched class divides." This demonstrates that unemployed college graduates are not lacking in talent or work ethic. In China, many high-paying jobs are pre-reserved by CCP officials for their children or relatives, creating a profound dilemma for graduates. In mainland China, an unwritten rule prevails. Many companies and factories refuse to hire people over 35. Even state-owned enterprises, once considered secure iron rice bowls, are now conducting mass layoffs. Since 2024, layoffs at state-owned enterprises have surged. For instance, China Southern Power Grid slashed staff, eliminating entire departments. A state-owned bank canceled 60% of its expansion plans, targeting last year's fresh graduates for layoffs. Once thought to be stable, state-owned enterprises now cut jobs more ruthlessly than private factories. A low-wage worker shared a unique perspective on the May Day holiday. For those with money and time, this short holiday means the thrill of roller coasters at amusement parks or footprints left on a beach at sunset. But for us low-wage workers, it's sleepless nights, vacant stares, helpless decays, and the painful longing for family reunions we can't afford. Why? Because holidays halt work, and no work means no pay. Many of us can't afford factory meals and must pay for food out of pocket. Visiting family is an unattainable luxury. For workers, this holiday is nothing but helplessness. Under CCP rule, many live precarious lives. Those who invested heavily in raising the next generation find their children struggling to secure jobs. For the poorest citizens, life is increasingly unbearable. Completely disgraced. Chinese tourists shunned worldwide. Is it just poor manners? What has made them increasingly uncivilized? A Chinese citizen criticized, are our compatriots embarrassing themselves? Some Chinese tourists got drunk at an airport in Laos, humiliating themselves abroad. Our trip to Laos was marred by incidents, people smoking wherever they pleased and urinating in front of royal palaces, utterly disgraceful. We tried to correct them, but they wouldn't listen. It's beyond embarrassing. Many Chinese tourists are loud in public, spit indiscriminately, cut in line, litter, and fail to sort their trash properly. This behavior leads foreigners to perceive Chinese people as lacking civility and education. In a city's central square, a group of Chinese tourists was seen soaking their feet in decorative fountains, not just one person, but an entire row of them. How could they not face discrimination? A Chinese tour guide remarked that the most basic expectation for Chinese tourists is to respect local customs. After traveling through over 10 European countries, he observed that many places are not particularly fond of Chinese tourists. While their shopping boosts local economies, their behavior often seems odd to foreigners due to its disregard for social etiquette and cultural norms. For instance, Chinese tourists often leave hotel room doors open and shout to neighbors across hallways. In many developed countries with refined social etiquette, even family members in adjacent rooms would not behave this way. Another example is Chinese tourists spitting on streets abroad, which is particularly offensive to locals. This habit, especially common among older Chinese men and heavy smokers, can lead to fines of several hundred euros in many European countries. Why are Chinese tourists unwelcome abroad? 8 years ago, foreign media criticized Chinese tourists in Thailand for rushing to grab buffet food, causing massive waste. The incident, widely shared online, sparked outrage among foreign netizens. In 2015, in Bicester, UK, outside a Burberry outlet, a Chinese woman held a young boy as he defecated on the ground, despite a public restroom being just meters away. In 2016, a Chinese woman on a guided tour in Russia allowed her child to urinate on the floor of the Grand Hall in Catherine Palace, shocking Russians. Built in the 18th century, Catherine Palace is a UNESCO World Heritage Site designated in 1990. Due to such uncivilized behavior, signs urging people to flush toilets, keep quiet, and refrain from spitting have become common in tourist destinations like France, Germany, Japan, and Thailand, frequented by Chinese travelers. Written exclusively in simplified Chinese, these signs are an undeniable source of embarrassment. Recently, a Chinese man attempting to enter Indonesia tried to bribe customs officials by slipping 500,000 Indonesian rupiah, about 230 RMB, into his passport. While handing over his passport for inspection, he recorded a video and proudly posted it online, boasting about his trick. The video went viral in Indonesia, triggering widespread outrage. Agus Andrianto, Indonesia's Minister of Immigration and Border Security, announced an official investigation. The man was immediately deported and permanently banned from entering the country. When such incidents surface, comment sections often argue, isn't this the fault of corrupt foreign officials? They're the ones asking Chinese people for bribes. But consider this rationally. Why do they consistently target Chinese travelers? Could it be because some Chinese individuals frequently use illegal visas or engage in shady activities? China has long been known as the land of etiquette, with a 5,000-year civilization. Yet, in just a few decades under the Chinese Communist Party, its global image has drastically deteriorated. China expert Yue Shan points out that historically, during the Han, Tang, Song, Ming dynasties, and even the Republic of China era, Chinese people were widely respected worldwide. However, after the CCP seized power, China fell under a regime rooted in proletarian underworld values, establishing a gangster state that permeated society and exported its rogue culture abroad. Following its rise, the CCP eradicated aristocratic families, disgraced scholars, trampled cultural traditions, and launched relentless political purges. It persecuted cultural elites, destroyed historical relics, and dismantled the moral and spiritual fabric of society. Through aggressive propaganda, the CCP instilled a culture of class struggle and shameless opportunism, causing Chinese society's moral standards to plummet. The chaotic behavior of some Chinese tourists abroad is merely a symptom of a deeper issue. Geopolitically, the CCP has turned Chinese nationals into spies, stealing global technologies and reverse engineering them for domestic use. Meanwhile, the CCP's wolf warrior diplomacy has made China notorious worldwide. Its diplomats, acting like Cultural Revolution Red Guards, provoke hostility wherever they go. Western countries have responded with countermeasures, leaving ordinary Chinese citizens to bear the consequences, facing heightened scrutiny and suspicion when traveling. We'd love to hear your thoughts. Drop a comment below and let us know what you think.